Bet the Board presents Stay Green. Stay Green is your first stop for all the metrics, matchups, and money-making opportunities at the track each race week. This is Stay Green, the NASCAR betting podcast. Here are your hosts, Todd Fuhrman and racing analyst Chris Werme.
Welcome into the Stay Green podcast, part of the Bet the Board podcast network. It's all things NASCAR as we recap the weekend that was and our debut race at Iowa and look ahead to what we'll see unfold on the mile-ish track in Loudon, New Hampshire this weekend. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by professional NASCAR bettor and my co-host on this very fine program, Chris Werme. And Wormser, we were told to expect the unexpected at Iowa. The race played out kind of like you envisioned, or were you as taken aback by some of the various strategies we saw unfold at that fine 7/8 of a mile track?
I certainly didn't think that 130 lap left side tires was going to be the race winning call based on practice that we saw on Friday. I think my overall takeaway from this race would be, this is a strong case for a 50-minute practice. We actually were able to see these tires fall off or have issues or malfunction or fail for whatever word you want to use. But we wouldn't have seen that if we had a 20-minute practice. So it was a strong case for that. The other thing was these guys are really good at setting up the car if they know they're going to have tire failures, because we didn't see it coming at Bristol, and we made it like 30 laps before tires started to fail. Here there wasn't really tire issues, or maybe a few guys, but for the most part, tires weren't an issue. And when these teams actually know going in that they need to be conservative, they're all able to make it happen and let these tires last. I'll tell you what, 130 laps on left sides, I did not think was the race winning call.
Look, we saw it before from a member of the Team Penske stable with Joey Logano keeping his car out long at a short track earlier this season. So a credit to these teams for making those adjustments on the fly and doing what it takes to get their car to victory lane. And for those folks who are tuning into the Stay Green podcast for the first time, we break things up around these parts. Stage one, all about the race that was and everything that we learned and what we might be able to apply going forward. Stage two, a race preview this weekend. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we'll head to New Hampshire for the USA Today 301 at Loudon. And then stage three, we did get a question last week from a prominent member of the sports betting community talking about championship odds. We figured we had a little bit more time to properly address that, so we'll do that there. Ryan Blaney, you mentioned it, makes the left side tires last, gets that elusive first win of the season, and suddenly Team Penske has not one but two victories on their resume so far this season. Joey Logano looking to try and get to victory lane. You have to give Blaney credit. It got him out front, and he led a race-high 201 laps. William Byron comes home second, puts together a good ride with arguably the third best car, had it not been for Kyle Larson wrecking himself after he got shuffled to the back of the field. We can make the case, much to the chagrin of the Stay Green listeners, that a Kyle Larson in a head-to-head against Christopher Bell, much like we did, that he was the best car on track, but you wouldn't have known it by his 34th place finish on Sunday evening.
Yeah, our best bets, if we beat the market, it's a loser. You should probably just bet it back. If we don't beat the market and it moves against us, we should just double down because those still win. It's just NASCAR is so hard sometimes. If you were to look at just the bracket challenge that they have going over at Dirty Mo, some of the cars that are left, like, well, what have they done right? Oh, they've just been matched up against cars that have had issues. So
it's the name of the game. It's survive and advance. It's a little bit different than the NCAA tournament field. And I think, to your point, not to go off on a tangent, it's what's going to make that 5-race tournament in the middle of the season when Turner takes over the NASCAR coverage from Fox that much more fascinating. And we can only hope, quite frankly, that odds makers are going to hang prices on those particular outcomes, not just some of the head-to-head matchups, but an outright who wins that season-long tournament or I should say that 5-week stretch, because you may have the opportunity to catch lightning in a bottle with some long shot prices.
Absolutely.
Although you look at the 4 remaining drivers, and a lot of them are still very much household names.
Well, they're household names for sure. But I think if you look back at the race, Larson, it'd be tough to argue against that being the best car. We saw him drive from the back to the front for maybe the first time in this car. We've seen someone go to the tail.
It had a very Xfinity feel to it. For those folks who follow the Xfinity series,
yes.
Well, anyone who used to bet on Kyle Busch when he was at his peak and some of the other Cup drivers deciding they wanted to race Saturdays, you almost hope that they qualified poorly or had to start in the back of the field, because that was the only way you were going to get some drama when they had a race to the front. Didn't know that was possible in the next-gen car, so credit to Kyle Larson and the speed he had in that hot rod.
Yeah, and then, gosh, I would say, I know he went to a backup, but Chris Bell was probably the second best car. I know that there's going to be some Blaney fans out there that don't like it, but Blaney had clean air all day and only had like 11 more fast laps than Chris Bell. And Chris Bell never had track position. He started last in a backup and was able to kind of work his way through the field. And it was rather impressive. He definitely got screwed by that caution that it kind of, they were able to take the wave around, but then you're just stuck behind so many other cars and you kind of have to weave your way through the field. This is really difficult to do. It's certainly coming faster at the end. And then, when it comes to that kind of the third best car, it's tough to actually penalize Blaney because he just was up there. What else do you want him to do, right? He was up there all day, kind of running top 3 or 4, maintained his track position. He could have been saving his stuff. So you don't really know when guys are out there leading by 2.5 or 3 seconds and they're going through lap traffic. A lot of the times they're just saving their stuff for a run, because if the car in second, whether it was Byron or Chase Elliott, were to kind of make a run, he would want to make sure his tires were cool to fight off that run that either the 24 or the 9 was going to have. I thought the 9 was decent too. Overall, fantastic race. Wanted to hate on it going in. Like, why did you pave it? Why did you half pave it? There were so many question marks going in, but I thought that they put on a hell of a show, and I hope that they're able to go back there next year.
Well, candidly, I hope that they go through and they finish the repave, honestly,
Sure.
Because I think there's going to be an opportunity for that racing groove to widen up. And if you have that whole track repaved, if it was any indication what we saw, this is going to be one of our favorite betting tracks. Maybe not next year with a full repave, but potentially a couple of years down the road as it starts to wear. We know those Iowa winters aren't exactly all that forgiving, and it could make for some very good racing. So we can only hope that NASCAR keeps this race on the schedule. We did see a change in terms of the regular season point standings. Chase Elliott, he has been the model of consistency, just 1 win on his resume. He moves to the forefront, and while it's not quite apples to apples, you begin to wonder if this is reminiscent of when Chase won the championship previously. Get faster and faster as the season progresses, hit your stride when it matters most, and suddenly we could be talking about the 9 as the car to beat, just given his ability to turn mediocre race cars into good finishes and not have that calamitous result. I know we'll get to more on that at the end. So wanted to bring that up here. Also, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Martin Truex Jr. officially announcing his retirement. Let the speculation begin. Who may take that 19 ride? Of course, all signs point to Chase Briscoe. We won't claim to break news around here by any stretch of the imagination, but it will be interesting to see how that unfolds. But what do you think of Kyle Busch's cryptic comments when asked about his time with RCR? Did you happen to see all of that?
I
when
didn't
he was on
see
the podium?
that. What was it?
Oh, he didn't basically reassure or commit to being at RCR, although he's got a no-talk clause in there. Was asked about maybe going back to JGR or Hendrick. I mean, Kyle Busch just can't leave well enough alone. I mean, what is JGR going to possibly do now going into 2025 for Kyle Busch that they couldn't do before? You couldn't land sponsorship for him when he was driving the 18. Suddenly people are going to come out of the woodwork and be able to pay Kyle Busch what he wants to command. Just a weird situation, and I guess the manifestation of all of his frustrations for yet another finish outside the top 10.
I mean, where the hell is he going to go?
No idea.
It's not like anyone at Hendrick is like asleep at the wheel. Even Alex Bowman was really good last week. He was able to work. I don't know if he was able to finish quite in the top 10, but
he got to 8th, quietly worked his way to
that
the
was
field
a hell of a run. He had an awful qualifying, which was kind of predicated upon when he qualified, and didn't have a ton of grip and started in the back and worked his way up. So I don't know where Kyle's going with this, but I will go on record in saying Chase Briscoe, Chase Briscoe to the 19 is a bad idea for JGR. I don't think that's.
Look at you with a hot take here.
Yeah,
Apparently,
I don't like that play.
Reading some of the comments and listening to some of the NASCAR insiders, they say that he's got a great relationship with Christopher Bell, and that may be the reason that they are trying to make the move for Chase Briscoe. I honestly don't know enough about the NASCAR politics and what goes on behind the scenes, but I have to believe that Chase Briscoe being able to bring a full-time sponsor in Mahindra Tractors over goes a long, long way. And the price tag to put Chase Briscoe in that car, not going to be nearly as much as what it would cost to bring on some other veterans. Yeah. And I guess to Briscoe's credit, he does have a couple of wins on his resume, so he's not coming in completely green as a driver for searching for his first Cup victory.
Yeah, I just don't like it. That's all. I think that there's other options, or you just go super young. I'm not weird Corey Heim. I mean, maybe he's kind of spoken for.
Yeah, it sounds like 23-11 is going to make a move for Corey Heim if they haven't already behind the scenes.
I still like Hocevar. If I was a top tier team, I'd be looking for him. But that's just me. I might be a Hocevar apologist, but I don't know much about the silly season stuff. I would love to learn the business of NASCAR and how contracts work and how drivers are paid.
I don't think anybody knows how it works. I don't think drivers and team owners know how it works. I mean, look, we've heard Denny Hamlin on Actions Detrimental, again, going on a tangent before we get into the race preview of New Hampshire, talk about the charter system. Nobody knows the valuation of a charter. Nobody knows the distribution of how these TV deals are going to play out. And I think NASCAR's governing body kind of appreciates it that way. But if I'm a businessman and I'm getting into the sport, I would much prefer to know, all right, this is what my franchise value looks like. I want to have an idea of what these charters are worth. And you see it in every other stick and ball sports. Hey, look, the Ottawa Senators sold for X. So-and-so in the NBA, we know what the valuation is on the Brooklyn Nets. You can get a general indication of what it means to own these particular teams, or in the case of NASCAR, charter system. Yeah,
I have no idea. But so I try not to get too involved in it. I just go by what I see with my eyeballs when it comes to talent. And I used to be a Chase Briscoe lover, and now I'm kind of like, I don't know. It was just, I think last year and then this year, seeing Gregson in the 10, I would say had more speed early in the year. And then what Kevin Harvick did last year with the same stuff, to me, I think Chase Briscoe leaves a bit to be desired, in my opinion. But
spoiler alert, as we get to the New Hampshire preview in stage 2, Chase Briscoe will not factor into any of our relevant discussion.
Not a best bet.
We'll wave the green, white checkered flag and encourage folks to follow Chris on social media at Chris Werme 15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Like we've mentioned a number of times, all of the smaller college football conference previews now alive and well. We'll get the gang back together next week as Payne and I get into the football foray with Brad Powers, talk a little ACC and Payne's beloved Florida State Seminoles. College football season rapidly approaching, and Bet the Board will have you covered every step of the way until opening weekend, or week 0, I should say, August 24th. But Werme, as we go to New Hampshire for stage 2, and we talk about track specs, we mentioned it earlier, it's a 1 mile thereabouts flat oval in Loudon, New Hampshire. It's the lone stop we make in New England every season. The Speedway hosts only one NASCAR Cup Series and NASCAR Xfinity events in the 6-state New England region. When we talk about track comps, Phoenix, Richmond, Gateway, I'll get your opinion on all of that in a moment. Potential similar skill set required at North Wilkesboro, etc. When we look at some of the recent race winners, there's Martin Truex Jr. putting together a perfect race last year, Christopher Bell grabbing the checkered flag in 2022, Eric Amarola the year before that in 2021, and Brad Kay in 2020. When you look at track comps for Loudon, we've gone to a number of short tracks in recent weeks. How do you weight the portfolio and past performances before you're handicapping New Hampshire, which you described on the pre-race poll, the 3 minutes we saw that wasn't broken up by poor internet connectivity, as one of the more bettable tracks on the schedule?
I love Loudon. I think that it's just kind of become predictable. I think you need a healthy combination of short run and long run speed. And there's a little bit of strategy, but I like 4 tires often. There's a few scenarios where maybe 2 tires, if you have 20 laps to the end of a stage, maybe if there's a caution, go take your 2 tires, go try to get some stage points, hang on. And you don't feel like you're gambling too much. If you're going into a longer green flag run, I do not think you'd want to do what Ryan Blaney did and kind of risk the 100 lap plus left side tires. I don't think that's a thing. I would say the closest track comps are Gateway and Iowa. I know from a speed perspective, I know that Gateway does have more shifting. Sometimes people will be shifting at Loudon. Other times, I know Truex last year wasn't shifting. No shifting at Iowa. So it's going to be a combination of, I think, Iowa and Gateway specifically. Richmond can kind of factor in, but gosh, that was a long time ago. I think, yes, when it comes to just, I guess, the timing of Richmond and Loudon would be similar, but it was just too long ago. And I think you could say the same thing about Phoenix. You could just look at, I guess, short track in general, like who are the guys that have just been fast on short tracks. And but I think Iowa's just a great comp. We're going to be seeing the same tire, and I'll use a lot of that information for handicapping this week.
Hey, one last thing, and again, I know we don't get into some of the X's and O's. Any explanation that you can rationally think of why we use the intermediate package at Gateway, that's a mile track, but we use the short track package at so many of these other tracks? I mean, should we be considering using the intermediate package there so we do get shifting and a little bit more torque and horsepower that's generated?
Well, but shifting also, you can use it to keep your corner speed higher. And whenever there's higher corner speeds, that's typically less passing. What you want is the most off throttle time as possible. And if they're able to grab a gear, keep the RPMs high and get back to the gas, you just see less passing. So I think that's one of the reasons why we did see so much passing at Iowa. Shockingly, there was one optimistic guy, and it was a very fuzzy feed at the pre-race poll saying that I don't think we're going to see tire issues. I do think we'll see some passing. And I still wasn't able to capitalize on it at all, mainly because I had my eggs in a Kyle Larson basket, which is,
a basket.
That's what it's kind of, the season. I feel like
the
season has come down to predicting whether Kyle Larson's going to win the race or not. Like, if you have him and he wins, it's like, oh, that's an easy bet. But like, when Kyle's the best car, and he's been the best car often, sometimes he doesn't get his finishes. I mean, he's very checkers or wreckers, and it's very rare does he kind of just end up with this third place finish. So there's my TED talk on Kyle Larson and betting NASCAR professionally. You just got to figure out when he's going to get a good finish and when he's not.
Very helpful. If you could tell me when the race favorite is going to go out there and win the race, it makes what we do for a living that much easier to try and create healthy prognostications. But all right, you mentioned Kyle Larson. We'll get into tier one drivers, and it feels like this week it's pretty much everyone from JGR and HMS and Team Penske, all classified as tier one. But Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr., and Denny Hamlin have taken up a lot more of the win equity. We've seen some of the other numbers shortened. So let's start with that particular trio that are all in and around that 9-2, 5-1 range. There are some shorter prices and longer prices if you do shop around. You mentioned Christopher Bell, 3 straight starts at New Hampshire inside the top 10. 29th last year, but that was more a byproduct of bad luck than not having speed. It ruined a streak of back-to-back 100-plus driver rating performances that he put together at that track. And when you look at his overall rankings in the next-gen era, 3rd in total speed, 3rd in driver rating, 4th in average running position. Of course, a lot of those things when you're out front, like Martin Truex, who we're about to get to, yes, you don't generate as much speed when you're trying to race through the pack. And when we look at Martin Truex Jr. at New Hampshire, number 1 in average finish, number 1 in total speed, number 1 in driver rating, number 1 in average running position, 426 laps led over the last 2 races. And he's won every stage during the next gen race at New Hampshire. And then, of course, there's Denny Hamlin as well, who enters the mix. His numbers not quite as sterling as the aforementioned drivers. And he's in what Denny would describe as a little bit of a slump after his performance at Sonoma, where the engine went out and a car that was plowing more or less from start to finish. Where I don't think I've ever seen Denny Hamlin go off the lead lap inside of 30 laps at a track in a long time, but that's what we saw unfold at Iowa. So when we look at the favorites, anybody that's particularly intriguing more so than the others?
I actually have a lot to say about all 3 of these guys. Denny Hamlin, for me, at this point, their kind of weekly progression just moves a little bit too slowly. They usually don't unload as like the fastest guy, and you're watching practice and you go, oh, look, looks like Denny's the car to beat. If Denny looks like the car to beat after practice, it's not because he unloaded super fast, because they made some adjustments and he ran a few faster laps later in practice. And then he typically doesn't qualify very well, and he works his way up. I think they kind of get the car where they need it by stage 3. which is a good time to be the best of the weekend. So I think
I'm beginning to wonder, and I know it's probably an unfair statement to make, if the 50-minute practices actually work against the 11, because it allows every other team to kind of bridge the gap where Denny typically comes in with a bigger advantage, and Chris Gabehart can adjust on the fly maybe a lot better than some of the other crew chiefs.
Which is shocking because he didn't adjust it very well after practice last week. To have that car go straight to the back after a decent qualifying, and he looked really good in practice. So again, Denny with the win equity of the 19 and the 20, I don't think there's any reason to jump on Denny at this point because he just hasn't qualified that well either. When it comes to Truex, yeah, he's been dominant here, but I want to go back and try to rattle off some stats from last year when he came in and he had a perfect driver rating here at Loudon and dominated the race. If you throw out Atlanta and Chicago of last year, he won at Dover. He finished 8th at Kansas. He had a wreck at Darlington. He was 3rd at Charlotte, 5th at Gateway, 1 at Sonoma, and then 2nd at Nashville. That guy is running in the top 3 to 5 and has speed week in and week out. I anticipated him to be really good coming into Loudon. This year's a little different. He was 3rd at Dover, 4th at Kansas. Okay, those are 2 pretty good runs, but then things start to get a little slippery. 25th at Darlington, 12th at Charlotte, a wreck at Gateway. Sonoma, he had the issues with the running out of fuel. He crept across, I think, in 27th, but he had to inherit track position in order to get up there and race for the lead. That was kind of him and Buescher were on a very lucky strategy. There were so many cautions. Otherwise, I think he's a 15th place car. 12th at Charlotte, wreck at Gateway, Sonoma issues, Iowa 15th, and he was kind of junk all day. I don't understand why I guess I do understand why he's priced, but I think Chris Bell, if you look at his last 6 races, he's led 187 laps relative to Martin Truex's 10 laps led. I think that Bell is actually undervalued at plus 450. I can't believe I'm saying that I think Chris Bell, that plus 450 is a good price. I kind of expected him to open 3. You and I had discussed that 4. We might wait on the move, but plus 450, I think is just too high for a guy that runs really well here, qualifies well here, and has had the fastest car at the short track, these kind of mid-tier short tracks all year long. I think he could have won Richmond without the speeding penalty. He obviously drummed the field at Phoenix. He has the issue at Gateway and was arguably the fastest at Iowa. I don't know what I'm missing here, but I love Chris Bell, and I do not like Martin Truex at that price of 9-2. I don't expect him to qualify very well, and I do not expect a perfect driver rating out of the 19 this week.
One thing I will say, when you look at Martin Truex Jr. last 3 trips to New Hampshire, he has started in 2021 second, 2022 started from the pole, and last year he started second. So definitely contributes to him winning all 4 stages during the next gen era. And over the last 8 trips we've made to New Hampshire, Martin Truex has won stage 1 5 of those 8 times. So something to keep in mind. You can understand why he's being priced the way he is, but look, everything is a little bit different, and you handicap based on current form sometimes as much as you do past history. Everything isn't always cookie cutter or apples to apples.
Bell also was in a backup last week, so it wasn't even his primary car that was able to drive back through the field. He also caught a very untimely caution. I am as bullish on this is as bullish as I've been on a car heading into a race in a long time. I think Bell's hands down the guy to beat.
When we go from tier 1 into tier 2, we look at a couple of HMS drivers. I'm jumping the gun a little bit. Let's finish up some of the drivers in tier 1. Team Penske, Ryan Blaney at 7-1, Joey Logano 8-1. Kyle Larson's number has come down a little bit from where it opened at some shops as high as 10. We've seen Team Penske really start to get things together in recent weeks. Talked about the win for Austin Cindric at Gateway, the win last week for Ryan Blaney, and these shorter, flatter tracks have probably been where Penske has been at their best. When we look at Ryan Blaney as far as the next-gen era at New Hampshire, he led 69 laps here in total since 2015, and 64 of those came in a single race. So overall, this hasn't been Blaney's best track. 3 finishes here of 18th or worse in his last 4. Meanwhile, Joey Logano, top 10 here in 5 of the last 6 races, only started 3 of those inside the top 10, so he's been able to work his way through the field. Interesting drivers to keep tabs on. And Kyle Larson, normally you could look to try and bet against him at some of these shorter, flatter tracks. Hasn't quite been the case. When you look at this particular trio of drivers, knowing what we do know about the Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell triumvirate eating into a lot of the win equity. Either of these three guys catch your eye heading into practice on Saturday?
Well, let's talk about Blaney first. So Blaney's coming off of a win, and I can't tell you how different I feel about Blaney's win being arguably the third, fourth, or fifth best car versus last year when he was at Martinsville heading into Phoenix. He was driving through the field, like clearly the fastest car. So he's being priced like he's been clearly the fastest car, and he hasn't been. He wasn't the fastest car when at Gateway when he got past, or ran out of gas. Now he's been good, but he's probably properly priced at this 7-1. And also, I think I just have a bias against Blaney. I don't think he wins like these other guys we're talking about. We're talking about Denny Hamlin. We're talking about Kyle Larson and William Byron, and those guys win a lot. And to have Ryan Blaney be priced in above them just because or priced in more expensive than them just because of kind of this recency bias. Now, I understand that these Fords have run well. I just don't see Ryan Blaney as a winner. Am I wrong to think that he just doesn't go out there and get it done?
I mean, look, he's changed the narrative a little bit. He can be pretty volatile in terms of his finishes, but he also strikes me as one of the streakier drivers in the Cup Series. And when things are going well, he gets it all figured out and headed in the right direction. And we saw that last week. I mean, he had a 7th place finish at Sonoma, a road course. Before that, though, a couple finishes outside the top 20, all in consecutive weeks. So it seems to come in ebbs and flows. He's a driver that, look, I didn't think he was going to perform as well as he did last week. I wasn't on or against him in any matchup situation. So it's always interesting to see the Blaney dynamic that's in play and the way the market kind of responds to him.
Yeah, and I do think he should be a shorter price than his teammate, Joey Logano. That guy hasn't even led laps outside of North Wilkesboro. And let's remember how he got there. He had a 4-tire stop in qualifying that was able to catapult him to the lead. We are on this, a different tire strategy that the alternate tires didn't even fall off. So there's no reason to not to use the prime tires. So you just, I don't know. I think that North Wilkesboro was just so different than everything that we've seen from Gateway to Iowa and certainly at Phoenix, where I would say are comp tracks. And I just think this is overpriced. Now, he's done a good job of just hanging around. He just hasn't passed a lot of cars, let's say 5 laps into a run. Certainly in a short run or on a restart, Joey Logano is as aggressive as anybody. He can pick up some spots, but you just don't see him passing a lot of cars. And I think that that's a good indication of where your race car is at. Now, Kyle Larson, on the other hand, he can pass race cars. The one thing I'll say about last week is he did not look that good in practice. And he was pretty lucky when it came to where he qualified in the qualifying order, which was dead last. I think that the track had taken the most rubber, probably had the most grip, and they only ran 1 lap, right? There wasn't a final round of practice. So the way that the weekend unfolded for this 5 team was pretty fortunate for Kyle Larson. However, remember that they were able to work on these race cars after practice and before qualifying. If you're going to give me the best driver in the sport and arguably the best, how about that? Arguably the best crew chief in Cliff Daniels, and you're going to give me Hendrick Motorsports, I think that they made the adjustments and made that car better because it was way better than everyone else when it came race time, and it did not look that way in practice. So I think that you have to give a lot of credit to Cliff Daniels and this whole squad for setting up that 5 car. Not to take anything away from Larson. We've seen him take a little bit of money from 10-1 down to 8-1, which is probably pretty normal for just guys that are looking at the track saying, well, Kyle Larson's never 10-1, probably should take a nibble.
Well, I mean, you mentioned drivers that have taken money, and as we get into tier 2, I mean, we saw Westgate open Chase Elliott and William Byron at 20. Those numbers did not last. We're looking at them pretty much 12s throughout the market right now. And as we talk about other drivers that would fall into that tier 2 class, Brad K, 18-1, some shops as low as 15. And then the driver that nobody knows how to price is Ty Gibbs, 16-1, sometimes in the open, 20-1. Never have any idea what we're going to actually get from the 54. So when we get into that second tier and we look at a pair of HMS drivers that are very capable, that showed speed last weekend at Iowa, finishing 3rd and 4th respectively. Brad K, for me, was a little bit of a disappointment at Iowa. I thought he was going to be better than he was, but when you look at his numbers at New Hampshire in the next gen era, third best average finish, 10th best total speed, 8th best driver rating, and 7th best average running position, and has started no worse than 11th in the last 5 trips here. And then, of course, Ty Gibbs. I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on Gibbs unless you have strong sentiments there. But when we look at those other 3 drivers, not sure if you have strong sentiments for or against either of them.
Well, my only comments on Ty Gibbs were Ty who? I mean, he was a guy that everyone thought was going to win a race earlier in the year, and maybe these tracks just don't match up to him. But we've been on a road course in Sonoma and left a little bit to be desired, hitting a wall that he said wasn't going to be an issue. So I'm not, we need to see a little bit more out of Ty. He's clearly the slowest Gibbs car week in and week out pretty consistently at this point. So a little bit of a learning curve, and maybe he'll hit his stride and can figure it out heading into the playoffs. But right now, he's a real tough guy to back, especially at these a flat track like this where you got to conserve your stuff. I don't have him on my list as a guy that can conserve his tires. So Brad K has definitely left a little bit to desire, but also there was not a lot of tire fall off last week. And I think Brad needs that. The places where he's been really fast, Charlotte has fall off. Darlington has fall off, obviously winning there. So I like Brad. He's also had very dominant cars here at Loudon in the past. Like some of the fastest cars I've seen have been Brad K now, albeit it was in the 2 car and not the RFK 6 car. I'm in no rush to get him just because he hasn't qualified very well. And let's just say he looks good in practice and he qualifies okay, maybe 12th to 15th. You might not see 18 to 1, but you're not going to see 7 or 8 to 1 either. So I'm willing to wait on Brad Keselowski. William Byron and Chase Elliott both open to 20. We've seen some money pouring on them here. I think that's just taking a price. Chase has just been really consistent, starting to find his groove. This is not a great track for Chase Elliott. In the past, he has said, I don't know why I don't like this place. I just don't. Some of his comments last year were funny. It's like, normally I don't like it here. And his crew chief, Alan Gustafson, has even said he just needs a perfect car to race here. It's like, well, you could say that about any driver at any car in this series and say, well, if his car is perfect, he can go win. And William Byron, I think he was decent last week. He just kind of hung around and did William Byron things. And if Blaney had screwed up, he would have been there to snag a win. So I understand why the markets move there, but I also think that if you do get a Chris Bell and up there qualifying on the pole or in the top 3 and looks good in practice, you could see him go off at that 3 to 1 price. And if that's the case, maybe you'll still be able to get these guys at these prices after practice and qualifying.
It's a fair way to look at it. And when you look at some of the head-to-head between those 2 drivers, I mean, pretty much a pick 'em right now with William Byron against Chase Elliott, give or take 10 cents in their matchups with Brad K. And we've seen Ty Gibbs take money against in some of the head-to-head matchups that are available with the 54. When we get into tier 3, real quickly on some of these guys, Tyler Reddick's number has drifted out to 25 to 1 thereabouts. Ross Chastain right around 30. The 17 of Chris Buescher in that 40 to range. Josh Berry opened a little bit shorter at 25 to 1, but as we've seen some of the favorites come down, what goes up must come down and vice versa. Josh Berry has been on the drift. And then Bubba Wallace, always interesting. His number 50 to 1, current form, nothing to write home about. But when it comes to New Hampshire, he does have back-to-back top 10 finishes on his New Hampshire resume in the next-gen car. Accumulated a driver rating of 88 last year and 107 in 2022. Other than Richmond, though, he hasn't exactly been great in terms of overall speed on some of the short tracks this year. When you look at tier 3, outside of the usual suspects, drivers that catch your eye this weekend.
Reddick, just that price. Should Reddick be 25 to 1 anywhere? He's got enough talent. I think there's enough speed in those 23XI Toyotas. I don't think they had the same speed as last year. But, we're kind of getting to that point where, okay, at what point do you just fire on Reddick to just grab a number? But he hasn't been passing cars like we've seen him in the past. He's a guy that kind of finds himself in the top 5 or the first couple of rows of a restart, but that's usually because of some sort of strategy. And I think you have to be able to pass cars. And those are the drivers that have set themselves apart. It is, Denny Hamlin, it's Kyle Larson and Chris Bell right now, and maybe some Buescher, Keselowski if you get into those 1.5 mile type tracks. But I don't know. Reddick seems he ran well at Phoenix, but just I don't know. He just kind of left a little bit to be desired, which is why we're seeing that 25-1 price. But shoot, if we start to see 30, then okay, he's still in top tier equipment, and it's still Tyler Reddick who can, where you have a race, there could be a 2-tire strategy or a 4-tire strategy. You got to start picking off some numbers on drivers that are just capable to go out there and hold a driver off for 20 or 30 laps. You could say the same thing about Ross Chastain. I actually think he's shown a little bit more progress lately. He's been running more in the top 10. He's been running some fast laps. He's been more in the mix from a week-to-week basis. He was fast at Sonoma. Not that that's going to be a direct translation, but he hasn't looked good there in the past. And now that he's starting to just look better, he was I thought he was fast at times last week. Maybe they missed the setup just a little bit, but his teammate ran well. So as an organization, they have to feel good about where they ran last week. And then Chris Buescher, man, I think they got it right with Brad being a much heavier favorite than Buescher. Buescher's just shown speed on the 1.5 miles. I know Darlington's not the 1.5 miles, but he showed speed there. He showed speed at Kansas, clearly. But just these short tracks, it seems like everything's been a long day for him lately. He needed a little bit of a break at Sonoma to get that top 5. Didn't qualify well. It seems like this is kind of a tough point in the season for him. But I'd certainly back him at 40 if he looks decent in practice and qualifying. But I'd also back him at like an 18-1 if he does look good and his price gets a little bit shorter. So the final guy, Josh Berry, at 25, I was not interested. As we start to see this price go up, probably going to be taking a little bit of this just as protection. Childers is a good racetrack for him. Kevin Harvick was super successful here. But again, Berry didn't look great last week in practice. You get Rodney Childers to look at a car over, a 2-day span, get it ready for qualifying. I do think he's as good as anybody at setting up a race car. I think that's why Berry had some success when it came to qualifying in the race. But this is considered a short track, which is Berry's forte. I don't hate that 40-1 price. Bubba, gosh, he does have the finishes here, but I haven't really seen the speed out of 23XI this year. I know I just said, some nice things about Reddick just based on his price, but I thought that 23XI last year, it seemed like they were qualifying better and they showed more speed week in and week out. Maybe they're just a tick off this year. And when you have speed, you're able to cover up some of the driver mistakes that they make while running a race. And Bubba just hasn't been able to just find his groove, for lack of a better term. So, gosh, the price, yeah, could he get out there on 2 tires and win or no tires and win? Maybe. I do think that there's enough speed under the hood, but I just don't know that team is firing on all cylinders right now.
Look, I mean, when you talk about Bubba, his margin for error continues to diminish by the week as far as playoff prospects and everything else that comes along with it. And to your point, just one finish better than 11th coming over his last 8 races. So maybe this is a track that breeds some familiarity and can get him back on the right track. His price currently reflects at least what we've seen form-wise at 50-1. So you can understand why odds makers not factoring him very heavily into their calculations this week. I'm interested to see how he unloads and, more importantly, how he qualifies there as well. Well, green-white checker flag on stage 2, and Werme, we can go right into stage 3 when we talk about playoffs. And when we look at some of the title odds reset, these numbers come to us, from a book out here in Circa. And when you look at some of these price tags here, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, plus 4.25. William Byron, a shade more than 5-1. Christopher Bell, about 6.5-1. Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, 10-1-ish. Tyler Reddick, 12. Brad K. Martin Truex Jr., 15-1. And then you get into a robust group of drivers in the 30s. When we begin to look at the playoff format, you and I talked about it early on in the season. I think when we did the preview show with Danielle Trotta about how unpredictable the playoff races were going to be. I can't see anyone trying to make a compelling case for backing either of the favorites right now in Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson, because you're going to have these numbers available to you when you get into these elimination races. When we get into the round of 8, I can't see a scenario while you're getting much in the way of closing line value for any of, I'll even go further than that, not just the top 2, but I'll throw William Byron and Christopher Bell into that mix as well.
I think you have to look at this through a bunch of different lenses. Number one, can they win at Phoenix? You got to look at, can they win at Phoenix? I think.
Well, Denny Hamlin's out then, so we're out.
So throw Denny out. I think you can take a strong peek at Chris Bell at plus 660. If you're going to take anyone under 10-1, it has to be Bell, in my opinion. And I have nothing. I have not bet a future this
Makes
year.
two of us.
You have to be able to win at Phoenix. You also have to say, like, are you beating the market? And based on the races that are coming up, who has the chance to I guess catch some momentum, whether it's based on the track or just the team picks things up. You want to make sure you're beating the market, because if you do roll into Las Vegas and you haven't beat the market, well, it doesn't really matter because you could add to your position. And and then you also have to take a look at the rounds of the playoffs. The first round is Atlanta, Watkins, Glen, Bristol. Well,
good luck trying
Atlanta,
to figure out that
luck.
particular trio.
Watkins, Glen, I do think that there's a few guys we can pinpoint, maybe a Busher. Obviously Hendrick Motorsports has been really good at Watkins Glen, and then Bristol, we had tire issues there. I don't think we'll see those same tire issues, but I'd be treading lightly heading into that week. If your job is to just make sure you're getting a top 10, I can't imagine you're going to, eat up a lot of win equity if you're just out there finishing in the top 10, just trying to get into the next round. Then we head into another fun round, Kansas, Talladega, Charlotte. Okay, Kansas, I can understand being able to handicap that race very effectively, and we know who's going to be good there. But we've also seen, was it last year when Martin Truex Jr. ran over a nail on pit road or ran over something on pit road and finishes DFL? It kind of kills his chance at moving on in the next round. Then you have Talladega, who knows? And Charlotte Roval, if we don't see fall off, it just becomes a strategy game. And I don't know. It's become very unpredictable in those first two rounds of the playoffs. Then we hit, to me, the meat and potatoes of the playoffs: Las Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville. Thank you for the round of 8. This is where you kind of got to get here, and then I feel like you can handicap the races. The guys who have been fast on mile and a half for Vegas and Homestead, who runs well in that short track package, and especially at Martinsville, who can save their stuff and their brakes. And then Phoenix, I think we're going to be able to turn around and look who is good at Martinsville and who is good in the short track package throughout the rest of the year, or throughout the entire year, and say, okay, this driver has an edge. When it comes to the odds, I don't like anyone really short. If I had to pick someone inside the top 10, it's clearly Chris Bell at plus 660, because I do think he has a chance, obviously, to win this week at Loudon. And then we're going to go back to Richmond, where he's been strong. He's shown speed on 1.5 or 1.5 milers. I don't know how that's going to translate to Michigan, where you're just a lot of on throttle time. But I think Chris Bell, you have to take him just based on his success with a short track package and his success at Phoenix. Brad K, man, if there was more 1.5 miles in the playoffs, I would say, yeah. Or if he gets to the round of 8, at 15-1 would be a hell of a price. But we got a road course, 2 road courses in there. Brad K has been at the rear of the field for those 2 events, so I don't see much value there. The 2 guys I probably would have circled that are at these high odds would be a Logano at 35, and my only explanation for that is he's got to start figuring it out. Like the 12 is starting to run up front. How much?
Look, Team Penske, I don't think if we had this discussion last year on June 19th, June 20th, or the year before on June 19th, June 20th, we'd have been talking about Team Penske as the team to beat. So clearly they have something special that they've been able to accomplish as we get deeper into the playoffs. Although Logano didn't get out of the first round, but at the same time, they know you have to peak when the races matter the most. And who knows, even with a different postseason schedule than what we've seen each of the last 2 years, this is an organization from top to bottom that has been able to get the most out of their drivers, or the most out of their equipment, I should say, for those high leverage races. Yeah.
And I guess the final thing is, do you have the points? Are you going to have to win races? And we're talking about these guys that are over 30-1, Gibbs 32, Logano 35, Chastain 35, Busher 35. They're probably going to have to win in the playoffs to advance. I don't know that they can necessarily point their way unless people have issues. I'm not saying that there's not going to be some randomness that happens in the playoffs, but I think it's really important to understand that some of these guys might need to win a race. If Busher slips up at all at Atlanta, he better go win Watkins Glen or figure something out at Bristol, because he could be one of the first 4 guys gone. But I do like Busher's ability to race a lot of racetracks. We've seen him win at Michigan. We've seen him win at Richmond. He's been very good at road courses. Even when he hasn't had a great race car, he's been able to finish up there in the top 5. And he's good on super speedways. We saw him last year win at Daytona. So he does have a wide variety of tracks where he's won and he's had success. I do think that lends to having more success in the playoffs, just because we do see a wide range of tracks. And I think there's going to be more variance this year in the playoffs than we've seen in years leading up. So I think that's probably the best bet out there, but it is a risky bet at that 35-1, just because he's so far back in points. He's probably going to have to win a time or two in the playoffs. And these races have been really hard to win. We've seen him throw 2 away this year so far.
Moral of the story, and my biggest takeaway as I get here, is that we don't see an opportunity to try and invest or any reason to try and jump the gun, given what we're going to see potentially play out during the postseason. So, I mean, when you look at the dynamics in play, look, every market doesn't offer the same type of opportunity and upside. And given the current layout for the 10-race playoff structure, look, I don't think there's any reason to tie up your capital this far in advance.
Agreed.
So, all right, my friend, green, white, checkered flag, or I guess I should say the checkered flag, as we put a bow on race weekend for New Hampshire. But there is one final order of business, and try and impart an actionable element for our loyal Stay Green listeners. It's what we like to call around these fine parts the best bet. Yeah,
I mean, I'm trying to think if I want to beat the market or have it move against us. So we're going to stick with the 2 favorites here in a matchup. I'm playing Chris Bell over Martin Truex Jr. I see no reason for him to be even close to this number. Excuse me. I like Chris Bell minus 125 over Martin Truex Jr. for all the reasons that I said earlier in back in stage 2. I think that Truex had a lot more momentum and a lot more speed at this point last year. And I think Chris Bell has the most speed in this series on short tracks right now. I like that bet. That's at Superbook for now.
All right, there we go. The 20 over the 19. Your pre.
It could be at other places. Bet. I just looked at Superbook.
I've seen higher prices out in the market. That's the best one that's out there. I believe Caesars was about 20 cents higher on Christopher Bell. So as always, shop around. Try and get yourself in with the best price readily available. And like always, we'll be back on Sunday with a race day best bet when there's a little bit more liquidity in the market and we've got an idea of who the cars are to beat after we return to our more traditional 20-minute practice sessions and qualifying. Mother Nature not deciding she wants to have a hand or meddling in some of our handicapping abilities. Anything else you'd like to add before we close up shop New Hampshire Race Week?
No, this is just a good betting track. I think that this has a lot of predictability built in, just with a little bit of tire fall off, not a ton of strategy. And I think there'll be some, the hope is to have some comers and goers need a little bit more fall off than we've seen at say Iowa, but we're also able to see passes. So slight progressive banking here, nothing crazy, but usually the guys that can get off, can get down and turn off the bottom there will have some speed. And I think, man, I love this Chris Bell price in the matchup and in the outright. So we'll kind of go with that heading into the weekend.
Sounds like a plan, my friend. For all those folks who are looking for a little bit more coverage as we get closer to the race, 2 hours before, you should be following Chris on social media at Chris Werme 15 for his pre-race poll. He has promised and assured me internet connectivity will not be an issue and an embarrassment to the Bet the Board or his own personal brand.
I know.
Of course, the loyal viewers to try and endure last weekend. And yeah, we'll be back with you next week when we head off to, where is it, Nashville? I can't even keep track with the schedule
Nashville
and the way things go. So a little bit of Nashville discussion in Music City. So for Chris Werme, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck with all of your Loudon investments this weekend. And most importantly, with a head-to-head matchup and a ticket on Christopher Bell over Martin Truex Jr. in hand come Sunday afternoon, we'll see you at the window.